Okay, Pat. We got some real history.
Oh,
here.
yeah, for sure.
We've got some history and some crazy stories.
Definitely.
All right, so catch me up to speed. So you've got this awesome history in working in these very large, complicated developments with really high-level people. Tell me about your transition, right, out of kind of that world into the investing world. So we know each other now through the world of investing, right? We both come from commercial real estate. Our paths had not crossed in commercial real estate. I woke up one day, right, in January of 2023. I looked around, I looked out, my glass tower window and thought, why don't I own those buildings? And at that moment, I remembered Andy Glore woke up one day and showed up in the CBRE offices and said, why am I doing this tenant rep? This is not where the money is. I'm leaving and going to start buying buildings. And I sort of had this aha moment, sort of like Andy did. And I was like, what am I doing? Right? I should own these buildings and I don't. So I made this transition myself and it sort of happened overnight, like you have this aha. That's how it happened for me. I had this aha moment. I was like, wait a second. 20 years in commercial real estate, tenant rep, I was trading my knowledge for money, right? We got compensated very well in tenant rep. But you're always chasing your next deal. So you're not really building generational wealth, although you can get very wealthy.
For sure.
You're not building generational wealth that you will hand down to, your kids who can then hand down to their kids. Kind of like Pace Morby or like Grant Cardone. So I had this moment, I woke up and I said, wait a second, I've been doing it all wrong. I actually went out and said to my husband, we've been doing it all wrong. And my husband looked at me. My husband's a physician. He'd worked at the University of Chicago. He runs his own business. We run medical clinics. And he said, I haven't been doing it all wrong, Ria. What do you mean by that? And I tend to be a little aggressive in my choice of words. And so what I did was overnight, I joined a mentorship. By the way, I just want to say this. It's not that I didn't know what a mentorship was. I didn't know what a mastermind was.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
What's the I'd heard about masterminds and I'm like, yeah, that's what other people do.
Definitely.
But I knew enough to realize like, okay, I'm going to Google some of this, which I did. And I was like, no, that's real. And that's real. Jumped in with 2 feet and then transitioned out of tenant rep and said, no, I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to start buying my own properties to build my own portfolio. At that point, I hadn't fully fleshed out whether I was going to be buying hotels or multifamily or single family. I thought I just have to get in and do a bunch of deals and figure out what I love. And then that's where you and I met.
Yeah.
Right. So I had been in this mentorship or this group, right? The 13,000 of us across the U.S. And then you and I met somehow. I guess you came into the group.
Yeah.
You identified me as a commercial person as well and said, hey, or I don't know if I reached out to you or you.
Oh, I was chasing you.
Okay.
It's just like when I tried to get that first job. So you're a very popular person. You're very heavily sought after. So I definitely chased a couple times for sure. And I was going to ask about the tenor rep side, but yeah, so we had met through this thing and I'm like, okay, Chicagoan, obviously, right? We speak the same language on that front. Right. Commercial real estate, tenor repping. And this group of people who are amazing, who would do amazing things, I was a little weary. And just from top to bottom, right? And I'm sure you could speak to this, but like the level that you're operating at with commercial real estate and organizations, multi-billion-dollar companies and landlords, institutional debt, all these sorts of things. It's at a very high octane level. And this is, I'm flipping houses or I'm doing this or that. So I was very reluctant. So I chased and finally, I'll take your phone call. But we had our call and you were like, look, I get it. We're speaking the same language. Dive in with both feet and drink the Kool-Aid. And I'm like, okay, I trust you. We hung up and I bought that plane ticket to that event, that first event. And that was, days later. And I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm going to Florida next week. Like I have to go to this thing for this cult that I just joined. And she's like, okay, I'll see you. Hopefully you come back, So I can't thank you enough, truly, for kind of taking my call, right? You're so busy and you're doing so many things, which I want to hear about. But it was, it was definitely a huge deal. So getting into the investing side, I think, and I would love to hear your take on the tenor rep, especially with what you were doing with a national client, it was critical to get into that next step, right? Learning a client's needs. I mean, you get to see the whole spectrum of a deal, right? This is what I need. These are the budgets. There's 100 people, 1,000 people in the mix. We're traveling. We need this type of thing, that type of thing. Negotiating against the landlord or somebody else, like the level of refinement of that, the legal side, the debt side. So, I mean, if you could share, right, like how that tenant rep side helped you transition.
Yeah. Let me just go back to, I absolutely, so I can so relate to where you were, right? You're seeing this whole other world, which is very different than our suits world in commercial real estate of Chicago. A little more traditional, right? We don't buy things with other people's money, although in the large commercial space they do, right? There's debt, and then there's, mezz lenders and bridge lending, et cetera. But, does that happen in the other, like, can you buy multifamily or hotels, sub-2 or seller finance? Yeah, you can. And there's all sorts of other creative things. But I can so relate to what you just said, where, you're sort of coming in and you're looking around going, wow, this looks really different than anything I've ever known. It looks a little cult-like.
Yeah.
I can relate to that because, in fact, I think my husband said, you've joined a cult. I said, it's the best cult I've ever seen.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so it was wonderful because when you and I connected on that call, I could see myself about a year previous with the same skepticism, right? And what I loved about what you did was when I said to you, it was sort of like metaphorically, I was handing you the Kool-Aid and saying, just drink it. Just drink it. Like, trust me, it's okay.
Yeah, totally. Right? For sure. Yeah.
And what I loved about you is you were like, okay, you know what? I'm going to step into the void.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take the action. And what's the worst that can happen? Right?
Totally.
And when you showed up at Squad Up and you were there at the event and like people were like, totally connected to you, I was like, oh my gosh, right? He's now having the same experience that I'm having.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
So I absolutely love that. So I'll get to your question now. When the part of my history that has been super powerful for me in transitioning into investing, right, into the world of investing, is that I had I have a corporate background, right? So I actually started in the hotel business right out of college. I worked for Hyatt Hotels. I was their assistant banquet manager at the age of 23, which I wasn't very good at, by the way, because I don't do great sort of managing a team of people. And then I went into catering convention services. So I was in both operations, and then I transitioned over to Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, Fairmont Hotels and Resorts as national sales manager. So I have both an operations and a sales background, classically sales trained by some of the best hotels in the world.
Yeah, sure.
But I was never meant to be a W-2 worker, right? And so, you have to wear somebody else's shirt. You have to follow their processes and their procedures.
You're making someone else money.
You're making someone else money. And quite frankly, I have my own ideas on how I want to do things.
For sure.
Right? And I'm an alpha, right? So I don't work well under teams of people that say, you're going to do it this way. So needless to say, I never felt like it totally fit. So then I transitioned into commercial real estate, which is quasi-entrepreneurial, right?
Yep.
Tenant rep, you don't eat unless you hunt and kill it yourself. And when I worked at CB, I didn't know that you could get a draw. I didn't know that as a tenant rep broker, you can go work at CB and they'll give you a draw. And then a draw means that your first piece of business, then they'll take whatever money they paid you for that year or 2 years out of that. I didn't know. I mean, I thought I was just like, okay.
Totally.
And that was fine. And so then I was at CB for 4 years. But of course, as happened to me in the hotel business, no, this doesn't fit, right? I need to be the one who blazes the trail, right?
Yeah.
So then I transitioned out of CB and I started my own tenant rep business, Bellaterra Partners. So that was back in 2008. But the skills that I took with me from tenant rep, both the hotel business, CB Richard Ellis, then running my own business, right? You've got to be a great generalist. You've got to do the marketing. You've got to do, right?
All those hats.
All those hats, Plus you have to hunt and kill and
totally.
right, like it's a lot. But I loved building that part of the business. So having those skills and being able to be organized and bring the right people in or contract certain skills out was very powerful, because once I decided that I was going to then transition out of tenant rep entirely. In fact, at the end of 2023, I stepped down. So I handled, at the end of my tenant rep career, I had one client. I handled their entire portfolio. It was an international portfolio.
Oh, wow.
So I had the privilege of executing transactions in Hong Kong, New York, San Francisco, Berlin.
Super cool.
Very unusual for a single no-name firm, right?
Totally.
But I was very lucky. I worked with, and they're a consulting firm, super smart group of people. They taught me a huge amount over the 17 years that I represented them. And I'm very, very, very grateful for that. So transitioning out of tenant rep at the end of 2023, I took a look around and I said, I can't do it all. So I said, goodbye to that client and stopped doing tenant rep altogether.
Wow.
Which was, kind of terrifying, because it's the goose that lays the golden egg, right?
Yeah.
And transition then into, I'm going to start buying assets, hard assets, right? With other people's money. I'm going to raise money. At first, I started looking at and doing single family homes and very quickly realized that it's not for me.
Sure.
Right? I do not want to own a portfolio of single family homes.
Right.
But the transition or the transfer of skills, right? Being organized, professional, documenting anything that you do more than once in SOPs, right?
Yep.
Having a very sort of, sophisticated, okay, what's our strategy? What are our goals? And then breaking it down into bite-sized pieces so that you can go after it in a sustained, long-term manner.
Sure.
Like, that was really clear to me. That's what we had to do in tenant rep.
Yeah, every day, right.
Like, my first year in tenant rep, I made $9,000.
Oh.
My second year, I made $22,000. I was in my 30s. Like, I was embarrassed because I had come from Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, Fairmont, where I had a corner office. I wore a suit, but we were really only making like $90,000 with bonus. Maybe you made $150,000, right?
But all the pomp and circumstance that come along with
you
that.
Travel, you stay in Four Seasons, right? You have
sure.
all the trappings of success.
Totally. But not in your pocket, right?
But not in your pocket.
Right.
So, taking those skills and bringing those obviously into the investing world was incredibly powerful for me. But it was, I had to take a look at that and say, okay, so what are all what are the high level things that I need to do, and then break them down into the smaller pieces, and then go after them aggressively.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But that's something like, you have those skills also, so we don't have to learn those skills, right? But the skills that I did have to learn, it was very unusual for me, because I didn't think I had issues around mindset. Right? Money mindset issues. But in my world, like, we don't ask each other for money.
Right.
Right? Like, asking someone if they want to lend you money, I'm like, that's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, kind of a faux pas too, right? The stigmatism around the world we came from, for sure.
And if you're going to buy assets with other people's money, you have to reframe kind of how you're thinking. Like, I'm going to be doing them a favor. If I have a friend or somebody in my circle who has $100,000 or $200,000 sitting in a bank account, they're losing money on that money.
Totally.
And if they don't know the world of real estate, acquiring, managing, running real estate, I can help them build wealth with their money by borrowing it with a deed of trust or a mortgage, right? A promissory note, and they can make 10 or 12% on their money. And I can satisfy a need that I have to use other people's money to buy and acquire these assets. So there's ways to help a variety of different people in the ecosystem.
Not to mention, right, all the tax opportunities, depreciation, all the things that come with outside of the actual cash flow.
Right, absolutely. But you have to reframe that in your mind, and you have to get comfortable with, how do I actually couch that to orthopedic surgeon, right, that I know in a different capacity, or the chief commercial officer of a large Chicago company, because we don't really talk about money at the dinner table.
Yeah, right.
It's a little gauche.
Yeah.
Now, I'm super comfortable throwing things out there like that. Like, that doesn't bother me.
Sure.
But my husband sometimes was a little like, are we really going to be talking about
Yep.
So the transfer of skills for me, so to get back, the transfer of skills for me was super powerful because I already had a set of predetermined ideas on how you grow and build a business because I'd done it at Bellaterra Partners.
Yeah.
And so I transitioned that into the investing world. But let me tell you, like I was working and still do sometimes every weekend, every evening, right? Putting things together, streamlining what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and then focusing. Now I had to do a lot of different deals to figure out what I want to do, what gives me enough yield or return, and what I don't want to do.
Sure.
And I've become very clear, right? My first year in the world of investing, I did lending deals. I did private money partnerships. I bought sub-2 homes. You know, you name it, I did it. And now I'm clear. I don't want any more single family homes because they're just as much work as 100-unit multifamily,
right,
which can give me really great cash flow and an equity multiple upon sale. And I can raise the money either in a syndicate or, you know, in a different sort of process
structure,
with a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah, definitely.
So my evolution has been really now honing in on what are the asset classes that I want to focus on and what are the kind of swim lanes or the businesses that I want to build. One of the things that that Pace Morby talks about, so Pace is our mentor because he runs this investment group. And there's a variety of different people. There are people that are just starting out and they're buying single family homes and they're talking to agents or they're wholesaling, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Or there are people like I just did an earnest money lending deal for $500,000 to a guy in sub-2 who's buying a $39 million multifamily.
Oh, wow.
So there's an entire range of people in sub-2, right?
Yeah.
You might only see the group down here.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's a whole range. But Pace, right, talks about figure out how you have your today money, your tomorrow money, and then your generational money.
Definitely.
And at first I was sort of like, okay, I'm not really sure how that all fits, but now I've become very clear. So for me, I've looked at this and said, I'm buying larger multifamily and hotel assets for my tomorrow money and my generational wealth, right? Because we hold those and they become, you know, bump up the NOI, force the appreciation. And, you know, you have a lovely exit, you know, multiple when you exit. But your today money, right? How do I generate money every single month?
Yeah.
And there's two ways, right? I have a land business with two other ladies, which is amazing. And that is the today money, right? We're cranking out anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
Right? We've built a little black box that runs in the background.
Sure.
We test and measure, we tweak, and then money just rolls in.
Yeah.
So that's been sort of my experience.
Wow.
And that's the evolution and the transition of what I brought from commercial real estate and from the hotel business.
Yeah.
And then brought into my investing world. It's been amazing, but you know, I'm constantly evolving, right? I'm now in a place where I'm having to systematize a little bit more because my time.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I have no more time. I mean, are you experiencing the same thing?
Yeah, very much so, the same way.
Yeah.